Chapter 2. Unseen Forces. The morning after, Decima found herself standing at the edge of the woods once more. She hadn't planned to come back, not so soon. She'd told herself she needed time to make sense of what had happened the day before. Time to rest, time to forget. But her feet had brought her here anyway, drawn by a pull that lived in her chest like a second heartbeat, a silent tug that refused to let go. The memory of the archway still haunted her, not as a dream, but as a certainty. She could still feel the stone beneath her fingertips, still see the shimmer of light that had flared and vanished, still hear the faint voice, not in words but in knowing. It was as if her thoughts had gaps she couldn't explain. Small, quiet blanks where the truth should have been. She clutched the edges of her coat as a breeze rolled in off the sea, sharp and cool. It slid between the branches like breath, stirring the tips of the pines with a whisper she couldn't quite catch. The forest looked unchanged. The same familiar trail winding between roots and bramble, the same shafts of gold breaking through the canopy. But it felt different, like the trees were watching her now, leaning in, listening. Like the very ground beneath her remembered what had happened here. The air was heavier too, not just damp from morning dew, but dense, as though it carried the weight of something waiting to be named. She stepped onto the path, and the quiet deepened instantly. Her boots made no sound against the forest floor. The usual bird song that filled the woods in the early hours was gone. Not a single trill or rustle, save for the occasional creak of a branch overhead. It was like the forest was holding its breath. And somehow, so was she. She kept walking, following the bend, in the path as it curved toward the clearing. She could now picture without effort the moss, the faint shimmer, the weight of the air, the way the world had stilled around her before it opened. She walked slowly, careful not to disturb the stillness, though it wrapped around her like a second skin. Each step felt heavier than the last, not with dread, but with expectation. As if the trees themselves were waiting for her to remember, something she'd forgotten. Her thoughts kept circling back to him. Daniel. She didn't want them to, hadn't meant for them to, but they slipped through the cracks of her concentration anyway. His face, his eyes, the way he'd watched her in the clearing. Or had he? Had he truly been there? She didn't know anymore. That was the most unsettling part. It had felt real, more real than anything. And yet there was a part of her, stubborn and logical, that whispered it might have been a dream, a product of a restless mind stirred by magic and uncertainty. But then she'd remember the way her skin had lit where he touched her, in the dream. How her pulse had synced with his like they shared a rhythm older than their bodies. That hadn't felt imaginary. It had felt like memory. She kept walking, following the bend, in the path as it curved toward the clearing. She could now picture without effort the moss, the faint shimmer, the weight of the air, the way the world had stilled around her before it opened. She turned the final corner, heart already racing, and stopped. The clearing was there, but the archway was not. Gone, as if it had never existed. No sign of stone, no shimmer in the air, no pulse beneath the ground. Only a patch of mossy earth and tangled ivy, where something ancient had once stood. Her chest tightened. She moved forward slowly, unwilling to believe her own eyes. She crouched, ran her fingers over the damp moss, searching for anything, a crack, a marking, a memory etched into the soil. Nothing. No trace, no proof. Just the echo of a moment that now felt like a secret only she remembered. A sharp pang rose in her chest. Not fear, not quite, but loss. Like something had been taken from her before she could name it. She stayed crouched for a moment longer, fingers pressed to the moss, half hoping the earth would pulse again, that something beneath her palm would shift, acknowledge her. Whisper back. But it didn't. Only silence. She exhaled slowly and stood. I didn't imagine it, she whispered aloud, voice barely louder than the breeze. I know I didn't. The woods didn't answer, but the hush deepened. She turned in a slow circle, eyes scanning the edge of the clearing, the pattern of shadows beneath the trees. Everything looked normal, but she could feel it, attention just out of reach. Like the magic was still there, just hidden. Why? Why show her something only to erase it the next day? Why let her touch that light? Feel it run through her veins, only to vanish without a trace? And Daniel, had he seen it too? Had he been drawn to the same place at the same moment? Or had he been something else entirely? A vision sent to lure her deeper? Her thoughts spiraled until a sudden rustling behind her made her spin around, heart leaping into her throat. Nothing. Just a flicker of movement between two trees. She stared, unmoving, listening. A single crow cawed in the distance, then silence again. She could have sworn she heard footsteps, but no one was there. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was not alone in the clearing. That something, or someone, was standing just beyond the edge of her sight, waiting for her to look away. Decima took a slow step backward, her breath catching in her throat. The hairs on her arms stood on end, prickling like a warning. She wasn't someone who frightened easily, not in these woods. Not here, but this wasn't fear exactly. It was something more elusive, a pressure, a pull, the same feeling she'd had before the archway revealed itself. Except now, it wasn't inviting. It was watching. She turned again, scanning the trees. Her eyes landed on a patch of deeper shadow. So still, so perfectly shaped, that for a heartbeat she was certain it was him, Daniel, standing just beyond the bracken, silent and still, as he had in the dream. But when she blinked, the shape dissolved into nothing but branches and shade. You're imagining things, she told herself that, but the unease didn't lift. The forest around her held its breath once more. Even the wind seemed to halt, then feigned the sound of a twig snapping. She flinched and turned, but again, there was nothing. No voice, no animal, no figure behind her. The clearing stretched wide and empty, but the sense of being seen, truly seen, had not gone. She stepped back again, one foot after the other, until she reached the edge of the clearing. Her chest was tight, pulse too loud in her ears. Something about this wasn't right. It wasn't just the archway's absence. It was the silence that had settled in its place, like the woods had closed a door. Not just to protect a secret, but to protect her from it. She turned away from the clearing, unable to stand the stillness any longer. The forest, once familiar, now felt like it had grown teeth. Quiet, sharp, hidden beneath bark and shadow. As she stepped back onto the path, a wave of dizziness swept over her. She paused, pressing a hand to the rough bark of a tree for balance. The air was thick, heavy in her lungs. The energy that had stirred in her the day before. It wasn't gone. It was just buried, shifted, moved beneath the surface. It was in the roots, in the soil, in her. She pushed forward. Each step felt like a conversation between her body and the earth, like something deep underground recognized her and was trying to decide if it should welcome her back or close itself off entirely. When she reached the midpoint of the path, where the light grew dimmer and the trees pressed close, she paused again. A memory flashed unbidden across her mind. Daniel, in the dream, his fingers slipping behind her neck, the glow that rose between them like starlight through their veins. That kiss. She felt it now like heat in her bones. Not imagined, not gone. Why him, she wondered. She didn't know him. She'd never spoken to him. And yet, he felt like a part of this. Of all of it, of her. She reached the edge of the woods, just before the path spilled back into her garden's fringe. The spell of the forest lifted slightly, as if she had crossed some invisible boundary that separated what was real from what was remembered. But something inside her stayed behind. Or maybe something followed. Back in her kitchen, Decima stood at the sink, staring through the glass as steam rose from the mug in her hands. She hadn't spoken since returning, hadn't turned on the radio or reached for her phone. The quiet clung to her like a second skin. Her reflection in the window looked unchanged. But she didn't feel unchanged. She set the mug down and reached for the silver pendant resting on the counter, the same one she'd held after waking from the dream. She turned it over in her palm. It was warm again. Not from the sun, not from her hand. She looked at her reflection more closely, leaning toward the window until her breath fogged the glass. There, for a flicker of a moment, her eyes caught the light in a strange way. Gold, not brown, just for a second, then gone. She stepped back. The air in the room felt charged, humming just beneath the surface. Her pulse echoed in her ears and she pressed a palm to her wrist. Was it her imagination? Or did something beneath her skin pulse in time with the forest? The same rhythm she'd felt when she touched the arch. The same rhythm she'd felt when Daniel kissed her in the dream. She drew in a slow breath, but it didn't settle her. This wasn't over. She could feel it now. A current threading through her life, invisible but constant. The forest wasn't finished with her. The magic hadn't faded. It had simply gone quiet. waiting, and somewhere, maybe across the street, maybe deep in the woods, maybe within her own blood, Daniel was connected to it too. She didn't know how she knew that, only that she did. She held the pendant in her hand for a long time. It was strange, she thought, how something so small could feel so significant. She'd worn it for years without ever questioning where it came from. It had always been there, tucked beneath her shirt, resting against her skin, forgotten in the way familiar things often were. But now it felt like a key, or a warning. She brushed her thumb across the surface. The metal pulsed softly beneath her touch. Not heat, not movement. Just a presence, like it recognized her now. Or maybe it always had. With a shaky breath, she slipped the chain back around her neck. The pendant settled over her heart with a weight that felt both comforting and heavy. Outside, the wind had picked up, rustling through the trees at the edge of her garden. The sound was gentle, but layered, as if the forest was whispering secrets just out of reach. Decima stepped to the door and pressed her hand against the glass. For a heartbeat, the trees stilled. Then, a crow took flight, wings cutting the air like ink across parchment. It circled once, then vanished into the clouds. She didn't know what it meant, but she knew this, something had begun. Something old, something binding, and whatever had happened in the forest, it wasn't finished with her yet.